The town of Evercrest hummed with a constant, restless energy. Cars honked in a chaotic symphony. People rushed along the crowded sidewalks, their faces illuminated by the glow of their phones. Everyone seemed to have a destination, a purpose, a grand plan unfolding. In the middle of this bustling sea of ambition lived a young man named Leo. He felt less like a part of the city's vibrant life and more like a forgotten stone on the pavement, completely overlooked by the hurried footsteps passing over him. To him, the world was moving at a speed he simply could not match, leaving him feeling perpetually behind and utterly invisible. Leo's days were a monotonous loop of unremarkable moments. His morning commute on the packed train was a battle for space, where he was just another anonymous face in the crowd. At his entry-level job in a large marketing firm, his contributions felt like a drop of water in an ocean. He would file papers, fetch coffee, and organize spreadsheets, all while his colleagues discussed big projects and celebrated major wins. He attended community college in the evenings, where the lectures seemed to drone on endlessly. He felt like a background character in his own life, watching the main story happen to everyone else around him. He was not unhappy exactly. He was simply numb. He existed in a state of quiet resignation, convinced that some people were born to shine while others were destined to blend in. The city lights of Evercrest, which were meant to inspire dreams, only seemed to highlight his own lack of sparkle. He saw success everywhere, in the confident stride of his boss, in the brilliant answers of his classmates, and in the glamorous lives portrayed on social media. His own life, in stark contrast, felt small and insignificant, a quiet hum lost in the loud noise of a world that celebrated only the biggest and the brightest achievements. Every evening, Leo would return to his small apartment, the day's fatigue weighing heavily on his shoulders. He would scroll through his phone, a window into the seemingly perfect lives of others. He saw old school friends announcing promotions, launching businesses, and traveling to exotic places. Each post was a small, sharp reminder of his own perceived failures. He wasn't failing at anything specific, but he wasn't succeeding either. He was just there. The feeling of being average was not just a thought. It was a heavy blanket that smothered his spirit, making it hard to believe that anything different was possible for him. The workplace was a constant, glaring reminder of Leo's perceived shortcomings. His desk was tucked away in a corner of the open-plan office, a physical representation of how he felt. He watched as his peer, a charismatic young woman named Clara, effortlessly commanded attention in meetings. Her ideas were bold, her presentations were flawless, and her name was always mentioned in conversations about rising stars. Leo, on the other hand, would rehearse a simple question in his head a dozen times, only to lose his nerve at the last moment. The gap between his quiet efforts and Clara's celebrated successes felt like an impassable chasm, reinforcing his belief that he just didn't have what it takes. At his evening classes, the story was much the same. There was a student named Mark who seemed to absorb information like a sponge. He asked insightful questions that sparked deep discussions and always scored at the top of every exam. Leo studied hard, but the information often felt jumbled and out of reach. He would spend hours reading the same chapter, only to feel uncertain and confused. Seeing Mark's easy confidence made Leo's own struggles feel even more frustrating. He started to wonder if he was wasting his time and money. The thought of quitting school began to whisper in the back of his mind, a tempting escape from the constant feeling of not being good enough. The pressure mounted from all directions. His parents, though loving, would often ask about his progress, their questions filled with hopeful expectation. "Have you gotten a promotion yet?" his mother would ask. "How are your grades?" his father would inquire. Each question felt like a small judgment, a measure of his inability to keep up. He felt like he was disappointing them, failing to live up to the unspoken promise of his potential. The weight of these expectations, combined with his own internal struggles, created a heavy burden. He felt trapped in a cycle of trying and failing, with the finish line moving further away with every step he took. This constant comparison became a toxic habit. Leo measured his own quiet beginning against everyone else's loud middle. He saw their highlight reels and compared them to his own behind-the-scenes struggles. The result was a deep and persistent sense of discouragement. He started to believe that success was a lottery, and he simply hadn't been born with a winning ticket. The idea of giving up on his job, his studies, and his quiet ambitions grew stronger each day. It seemed easier to accept his fate as an average person than to continue fighting a battle he felt he was destined to lose. The world was just too fast, too competitive, and too loud for someone like him. One dreary Saturday evening, Leo visited his parents. He found his father in the garage, a place filled with the comforting sense of sawdust and old paint. His father, a quiet and methodical man, was focused on repairing an old wooden dining chair. One of its legs had split, and the chair wobbled precariously. Leo watched as his father didn't try to force the pieces back together or use a quick, messy solution. Instead, he worked with incredible patience. He carefully cleaned the splintered edges of the wood, slowly sanding each surface until it was perfectly smooth. He took his time, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Leo, feeling restless and impatient with his own life, asked, "Dad, why are you spending so much time on that? Wouldn't it be faster to just buy a new chair?" His father paused, looking up from his work. He held up 2 pieces of the broken leg. "True success, Leo," he said softly, "isn't about being fast. It's about being steady. If I rush this, the glue won't hold. The leg will just break again under pressure. But if I prepare it properly, one small, careful step at a time, it will be stronger than it was before." He then meticulously applied a thin layer of wood glue, clamped the pieces together, and set it aside to cure. That simple moment in the garage struck Leo with the force of a revelation. He saw his own life in that broken chair. He had been trying to find a fast, dramatic fix for his feelings of inadequacy. He wanted a sudden promotion, a flash of brilliance in class, an overnight transformation. He was looking for a miracle. His father's words echoed in his mind. True success isn't about being fast. It's about being steady. He realized he had been focused only on the big, intimidating results, ignoring the small, manageable actions that could lead to them. He was trying to build a skyscraper without first laying a single brick. As he drove home that night, the city lights seemed different. They were no longer a taunting reminder of a world he couldn't join. Instead, they looked like a collection of individual points of light, each one shining on its own. He thought about his father's patient hands, slowly sanding the wood. He thought about the glue, needing time to set and create a bond. The lesson was clear. Big, lasting changes were not the product of one grand effort. They were the cumulative result of many small, consistent actions performed over time. For the first time in a long while, Leo felt a flicker of hope. He didn't need to become a different person overnight. He just needed to start with one small step. The next morning, Leo woke up with a new sense of purpose. He wasn't going to change his entire life in one day. Instead, he was going to follow his father's advice and focus on small, steady actions. He looked at the thick textbook for his economics class, a book that had always intimidated him. But instead of trying to read a whole chapter, he made a new rule for himself. He would read just 2 pages. It was a tiny goal, almost laughably small. But it was also achievable. So, he sat down and read 2 pages, and when he finished, he felt a quiet sense of accomplishment instead of his usual overwhelming dread. It was a small win, but it was a win. He applied this new philosophy to other areas of his life. He wanted to be healthier, but the idea of going to the gym was daunting. So, he decided he would do just 5 push-ups every morning. The first day, his arms trembled, and he barely managed to complete them. It felt insignificant. What good could 5 push-ups possibly do? But he did them anyway. He also wanted to improve his financial situation. Instead of dreaming of a big salary increase, he decided to save just $1 from his lunch money each day. He found an old jar and dropped the first coin inside. The clink it made was barely audible, a tiny sound in his quiet apartment. At work, he stopped worrying about making a huge impression like Clara. Instead, he focused on doing his current, simple tasks perfectly. He organized his files with meticulous care. He made sure the coffee was always fresh. When asked to create a spreadsheet, he double-checked every single formula for accuracy. His boss didn't notice at first. His colleagues were still focused on their big, exciting projects. Leo's tiny efforts went completely unseen. He was still the quiet guy in the corner, but now his quietness was filled with a sense of purpose. He was no longer just existing, he was building. These initial steps felt almost foolishly small. Reading 2 pages didn't make him an expert. 5 push-ups didn't give him muscles. Saving $1 a day didn't make him rich. From the outside, nothing had changed. He was still the same average Leo. But on the inside, a fundamental shift was occurring. He was no longer paralyzed by the size of his goals. He was focused on the process. He was laying his foundation, one small, almost invisible brick at a time. He was learning that the journey of 1,000 miles truly does begin with a single, manageable step. The first few weeks of Leo's new routine were a silent test of his resolve. There were no immediate rewards. His classmates still didn't notice his slowly growing knowledge. His colleagues at work still overlooked his meticulous efforts. Some days he felt tired and unmotivated. The temptation to skip his small habits was strong. Why bother reading 2 pages when an exam was weeks away? Why do 5 push-ups when he still looked the same in the mirror? Voices of doubt, both internal and external, whispered that his efforts were pointless. A coworker once joked, "Leo, you organize those files like you're saving the world." The comment stung, making his small efforts feel even smaller. Despite the lack of external validation, Leo persisted. He held on to the image of his father and the broken chair. He reminded himself that he was not looking for a quick fix. He was building something that would last. He created a simple chart on his wall, and every day he completed his tasks, reading 2 pages, doing his push-ups, saving $1, he would draw a small X. Soon, a chain of X's began to form. His main goal became simple: don't break the chain. This visual proof of his consistency became his primary motivation. He wasn't focused on the outcome, he was focused on showing up every single day. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. After a few months, his 5 push-ups a day became 10, then 20. He started to notice a new firmness in his arms and chest. He felt stronger and had more energy throughout the day. The 2 pages of reading each day had compounded. By the time the midterm exam arrived, he had read through the entire textbook without ever feeling overwhelmed. He walked into the exam room feeling calm and prepared. He wasn't the most brilliant student like Mark, but he knew the material thoroughly. He answered the questions with a quiet confidence he had never felt before. The small habits began to spill over into other areas of his life. His commitment to doing his simple job tasks perfectly earned him a reputation for being reliable. When a small but critical project required someone with an eye for detail, his manager, remembering Leo's flawless spreadsheets, assigned it to him. It wasn't a glamorous project, but it was a chance to show his capability. He approached it with the same philosophy: one small, steady step at a time. He broke the project down into tiny, manageable tasks and completed each one with care. His persistence was paying off, not with a sudden explosion of success, but with the slow, steady dawn of new opportunities. Years passed. Leo's small, daily habits had compounded into remarkable, life-altering results. The 2 pages of reading a day had turned into hundreds of books. He not only graduated from community college with honors, but continued his education, eventually earning a degree that opened up new career paths. His consistent saving, once just $1 a day, had grown into a significant emergency fund, giving him a sense of financial security he had never imagined. The daily push-ups had evolved into a full fitness routine, transforming his health and posture. He no longer walked with a hesitant shuffle. He moved with a calm and grounded confidence. At work, his reputation for reliability and diligence had made him indispensable. He was no longer the invisible man in the corner. He had been promoted several times, eventually becoming a project manager known for his ability to handle complex tasks with unwavering calm. People now came to him for advice. Even Clara, the one-time star of The Office, respected his methodical approach and sought his input on difficult challenges. He didn't have her natural charisma, but he had something more powerful, a proven track record of consistency and trustworthiness. He had become a pillar of stability in the fast-paced company. One day, the director of a local youth center in Evercrest, who had heard of Leo's journey from a former colleague, invited him to speak to a group of young people. These were teenagers who, like him years ago, felt lost and overlooked in the busy city. Standing in front of them, Leo felt a pang of his old nervousness. But as he began to share his story, the words flowed easily. He didn't talk about genius or luck. He talked about the broken chair. He talked about reading 2 pages, doing 5 push-ups, and saving $1. He showed them the simple power of showing up every day. He concluded his talk with the most important lesson he had ever learned. True, lasting success, he told the captivated audience, doesn't come from a single moment of greatness. It doesn't arrive in a sudden flash of inspiration or luck. It is built slowly, quietly, in the small choices you make every single day. It's the sum of your habits. You don't need to be the smartest or the fastest person in the room. You just need to be the most consistent. Start small, stay steady, and trust that your efforts, no matter how insignificant they seem today, are compounding into the successful future you deserve. In that moment, Leo understood he had not just built a successful life, he had become a beacon for others, proving that the smallest steps, when taken consistently, can lead to the greatest destinations.